Eastern Cape. And it was subsequently the letter that was to lay the basis for a major revival of the Communist Party under the leadership of Ntate Kotane. In essence, the letter was a plea for the party to become more grounded, that the party should live amongst the people. It should not live in an ivory tower in Johannesburg. And then he made his suggestion. He said, my first suggestion is that the party must become Africanized, and that the Communist Party of South Africa, as it was called then, must pay special attention to South Africa to study the conditions in this country and concretize the demands of the toiling masses from first-hand information, that we must speak the language of the masses and must know their demands. That is what Moses Kotane said, that while it must not lose the international allegiance, the party must become Bolshevized, become South African, not only theoretically, but in reality. It should be a party working in the interests and for the toiling people of South Africa. It was Ntate Kotane and the former president of ANC, Gumede, who came up with this notion of Black Republic, because they said we needed to make sure that the Communist Party is grounded in South Africa and knows the conditions under which our people live, but it must also listen. It must hear what the masses of the people are saying. Now, the reason I'm raising this, comrades, is because there is a temptation for leaders not to listen to the masses of the people. And I'm saying we must never give in to that. We must remember what Moses Kotane said in his Craddock letter. The late 60s, and I come to another era now, the late 60s was to become another crisis moment for our national liberation movement, the African National Congress. The vicious crackdown of the apartheid regime, the burnings, the torture, the mass arrests, the killings, the hangings had left our surviving leadership either serving long terms in prison or in exile. Our grassroots organizations had also been decimated. The beginnings of the turning point came with the ANC's 1969 Morogoro Conference. It is interesting to note that the line of march in Morogoro, particularly in the strategy and tactics document, was essentially the same as that contained in Moses Kotane's Craddock letter 3.5 decades earlier. This was what the Morogoro Conference declared. Our nationalism must not be confused with chauvinism or narrow nationalism of a previous epoch. It must not be confused with a classical drive by an elitist group amongst the oppressed people to gain ascendancy so that they can replace the oppressor in the exploitation of the masses. But none of this detracts from the basically nationalist context of our liberation drive. And underline, there must not be an elitist group amongst the oppressed people, because there can be temptations of having elitist groups amongst us. Both Ntate Kotane in 1934 and our movement at Morogoro in 1969 understood that the revitalization of our movement had to be rooted both practically and strategically in the masses, in the popular struggles of our people. That applies to our current situation. Dade Kotani knew what speaking the language of the masses and knowing the demands are all about. Our people want an ANC that is committed to our people in an irrevocable manner, an ANC that is beyond reproach, an ANC that is not captured, an ANC that puts the interests of the people first and the interests of the leaders last. That is the type of ANC that Moses Kotane was talking about. He was talking about an ANC that understands when our people are happy, when our people are complaining about what they see us doing, when our people are complaining about corruption, when our people are complaining about factionalism, when our people are complaining about all the wrong things that we are doing. That is what Moses Kotane was talking about. And he was saying we need to listen to the views and the concerns of our people. We are at that moment, comrades, and we must talk about these things. We must not hide these things. Some people say, no, don't talk about them, because when you talk about them, you are actually brandishing the organization. And we are saying we need to learn from history. History must be our great teacher so that we do not repeat the mistakes, the same mistakes that were done in the past. Because if they made the same mistakes in the 30s and the 60s, why must we repeat them today in 2017? Our efforts, comrades, to give effect to the call split. We are not going to allow the ANC to split. And I told them that it will not split because the ANC has the responsibility to unite the people of our country, and that the ANC itself has its own responsibility of remaining united. And they were saying the ANC is so factionalized, our own assessment from a ratings agency side is that we see that this movement is going to split. And I said, with a very stern look, looking them in the eyes, I said, it shall not happen to the African National Congress. And as the African National Congress, we have the responsibility to give hope to our people, to give that hope to our people, as I gave that message to Moody's, that we will not split. We need to give hope to our people that we are not a splitting organization. We are going to remain united as the African National Congress. We also need to engage in order to achieve this great responsibility that we were given by our forebears when the ANC was founded, is that we've got to engage with all sectors of society. We must engage with them with a view of providing leadership. But we must also know that this historical responsibility has to be constantly earned. It was not decreed that the ANC will always be leading society. We've got to earn it. We've got to work hard. We've got to make sure that we remain at the cutting edge of uniting our people on an ongoing basis. But we also need to be honest enough to acknowledge that in the public mind, the ANC and its government are increasingly associated, fairly or unfairly, with wrong things that the public continues to see us doing, like corruption, like pursuing narrow personal enrichment approaches. The ANC is continuously associated with precisely the kind of elite nationalism that the Morogoro Conference proudly declared would not be the route pursued by the ANC once it is in power. This past week, comrades, we received what made me very sad. What made me very sad was when the South African Council of Churches stood up on a public platform before the whole nation and said that we are on the brink of becoming a mafia state. Now that should worry any one of us. And they have released this report, which Comrade Soli was talking about. Now that is something that should make all of us sad. For South Africa, Nelson Mandela says it we are on the brink of a mafia state. And in doing so, they reflected the concerns of many South Africans inside and outside our movement. And if we are to counter this grave threat, and the reason I'm raising it is to say, yes, they've released that report, they've raised the concern, and if we, as the African National Congress, are to counter this grave threat, if the ANC is to recover its leadership role in society, then it is absolutely imperative that we act with urgency and purpose and make sure that we never become a mafia state. Because once you become a mafia state, all the wheels have come off. Ahusana molao, ahusana kotompana, anything happens. South Africa must never be allowed to get there. The churches spoke at length about the state capture and their concerns about this problem. This, comrade, is becoming a running concern amongst a number of people. We need to go to the bottom of it with a view of finding out the truth so that people's reputations, so that people's things, whatever they did, should be cleared up. And the only way to clear this up, as I have said before, is through an independent judicial commission that must be established so that we go to the bottom of this. And more people are now saying, this is the only way out. Kotani, to continuously be hearing about state capture, that this one did that one did that, and it's not a good thing for us in our country. We now need to go to the bottom of this. More and more voices are coming to the fore, and it is about time that this matter must be put to rest. It must be properly investigated. We must leave it behind us as we move on to 2019, because 2019 is our destination, where the ANC must go and win elections. It is only, comrades, through this commission that we will be able to establish the extent to which the institutions of our state have been used improperly and illegally to enrich a few individuals as well as a few families. It is only when we have done so. Kotani, there are rumors going around. For years, there are only a few families that have benefited to the exclusion of all our people. There are a few individuals that have benefited and continue to benefit from the resources that belong to all of you sitting here, all our people. And we must act to stop all forms of capture. We must act to stop all forms of corruption. We must act to stop all forms of cronyism. And we need to address the weaknesses in governance in various institutions. When I was talking to the rating agencies, and they said to me, Deputy President, tell us, why should we encourage investors to continue investing in your country when there is so much turbulence, when there is so much instability? And I said, you know what? You need to continue encouraging investors to invest in South Africa and look at our country as an aeroplane that is flying. And I said, this aeroplane has two engines that are strong, that are functioning, and the one engine is that we've got really good institutions. Our constitutional democracy is supported by good and strong institutions. We've got institutions such as the judiciary, institutions such as the public protector, the Human Rights Commission, the Reserve Bank, various other institutions. And I said, we also have non-governmental institutions that are also there to support democracy. Those institutions are the churches in our country. Those institutions are various other institutions that we have that operate within the ranks of our. And those institutions are there to ensure that democracy is stable in our country. They are strong, they are robust, and that is the one engine of this plane that is flying, the South African plane. And I said the other engine is made up of the rule of law. We've got a constitution and we adhere to rule of law. When we make laws, we want to ensure that those laws are adhered to. And I said, those are the two critical engines that will continue to support this plane that is flying. And I said, it is possible that this plane, as it flies, will go through turbulence. You will see its wings flapping like that. And you think that this plane is going to fall. And I said to them, this plane is not going to fall because it is supported by two strong engines. And this plane, the body of this plane, are the people of this country. And they are not going to allow the democracy that they fought for to be taken away from them. And I said, this is the South African plane. It is flying, and it is going to reach its destination. This plane is not going to crash. Trust it. Trust this plane, for it will get to its destination. And then one of them asked me, what about the pilots? What about the pilots? And I said, you know, there's a new technology in plane flying. You trust for this plane will reach its destination. And the destination this plane is going to reach is to deliver a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. And I said we are committed to that. But comrades, as we do that, and as I gave them that answer, I said, yes, we've got our work cut out. We've got things that we must do. We've got things that we must do as we remember how people like Moses Kotane went about correcting the wrong things that were happening in the movement. And some of those things we are going to make sure that our state-owned enterprises function well, that our state-owned enterprises do not become the target of rent-seeking activity that misdirects public resources. And I said, we are in the process of correcting that. Our formations, especially the ANC, must respond to issues our people are concerned about. Our people have this view that we are advancing our own self-interest. And that is one of the things that we need to correct. We must introduce, as the African National Congress, but because our people are concerned about us as leaders in the African National Congress, we must now present ourselves anew. We must rebrand our movement, but we must also rebrand ourselves. We must introduce this concept that was introduced earlier and which was accepted by our formations. We must introduce this issue. We must look at ourselves as leaders of the African National Congress, as leaders of the alliance, the extent to which we remain committed, truly remain committed to the cause that should advance the interests of our people. But we cannot do this, as Kotani reminded us 83 years ago, unless we do it in a principled way. And if we're going to talk about unity, we must be talking about unity in a principled way. And it must be unity that is grounded on programmatic activity among the masses of our people. In this regard, in honor of Moses Kotane, I wish to applaud the SACP for embarking on a continuous basis on programmatic activity annually on specific issues that have advanced the interests of our people. For instance, your October campaigning activity, you have successfully led the campaign on financial services, And if Moses Kotane were to wake up today, he would be very proud of what the South African Communist Party is doing. Now, programmatic activity is the lifeblood, comrades, of any organization. As all of you are members of the ANC, you should make your branches the live wires of community activity. And we must also, as we look at programmatic activity, look at key dates within our calendars. Key dates like this Moses Kotane lecture, which I'm told has been held regularly since 1994. You have adhered to a programmatic process where through these lectures you are trying to spread the message of unity, you are trying to spread the message of strengthening our organization. And we must also use key moments in our alliance to rejuvenate various components of our alliance. This means that we must use the major events of 2017. The ANC Policy Conference must be used to rejuvenate the African National Congress. We must also use the Congress of the SACP in June to rejuvenate the South African Communist Party. We must also use the ANC December Conference to rebuild, renew, rejuvenate the African National Congress so that when it emerges from that conference, it must be spick and span ready for the 2019 fight. And as we do so, we must be careful, as we do all this, comrades, we must be careful not to become too inward-looking. And we must be careful not to be too absorbed by maneuvers of palace politics. We should not be overly diagnostic. We must be diagnostic, but at the same time, we must come up with solutions to correct our to address our current challenges. And if we do that, we will then be able to look beyond 2017. We will then be able to look at 2019. We need to look also beyond those 2019 elections, and we need to give real content and meaning to the imperative of the transformation process that we are involved in. Because right now, comrades, right now we are in an era where we've got to radically transform nearly everything that we are doing. We've got to radically transform our country socially. We've got to radically transform our country economically, but we've also got to radically transform our own politics so that the politics that we practice must become politics that are going to make us relevant to the people of our country, so that the people can see that indeed the African National Congress remains politically the leader of society. It is this transformation, comrades, that we must lead. The African National Congress must lead this transformation, and as we lead it, it must be radical, and we must not only be using words, and we must not only be using sound or sound bites and just being loud. We must not only be shouting the words, radical transformation. We must be meaning this in true effect. We must mean it and we must do it. This is the time that has arrived for us, comrades, as a movement to truly live up to what we say. What we promise to our people, we must go out and do. Because our people are saying, we always promise and promise. What we must now radically transform is actually saying to our people, what we say we will do, which is exactly what you want as our people, we are going to do in real effect, and we are also going to make sure that it really has an impact. There's widespread acknowledgement, including from bodies, comrades, like the World Bank, like the IMF, that the problems of our economy are essentially structural problems. Even those bodies, and I'm saying this for those who have been saying that they are afraid of this term, radical transformation, even bodies like the World Bank, like the IMF, they say the problems of your economy is that they are structural and they are systemic. It is these structural and systemic issues that are responsible for the extraordinarily high levels of unemployment and racialized inequality, as well as poverty in our country. Now, this time round, the African National Congress and the Alliance has to be more preoccupied with how we are going to fully transform this economy, to transform it so that in 5 to 10 years' time, this economy must not look like this type of economy that we have, because the economy we have still resembles the economy that we inherited in 1994. So things must change now. So our task, comrades, beyond this December conference, is to see how best we are going to transform this economy so that it gives our people the democratic dividend that they have been yearning for. We are still dealing with a stubborn legacy of 350 years of dispossession and exploitation, and therefore we need to deal with the structural problems. But what are some of these structural problems? Moses Kotane would have identified them, as he did as a good communist. The structural problems that we are facing are the high levels of monopoly concentration of economic control and ownership in our country. That is one thing that we need to address. And radical economic transformation must address itself to that. The IMF, there's a person who once came here from the IMF, and he concluded that the problems of your economy and the reason why your economy is not growing is because of the high concentration of economic control in your economy. And he said, unless you address that, your economy will not grow. And therefore, the hour has arrived for us to address precisely this issue, to address the issue of the concentration of monopoly control in our economy. Do we have the instruments? Yes. The African National Congress is our main instrument, and that is why we must keep it intact, united, so that the ANC must lead the process of ensuring that we do ensure that our economy benefits the majority of South Africans. Because right now, our economy just benefits the few people who have always enjoyed economic benefit. Are we going to do it? Yes, we are going to do it. We will make sure that it is done, and it will get done. This opens the door, comrades, for us to be able to charge ahead with the transformation that is necessary. What this means, comrades, is that we should stop talking fela ka economic transformation. Re sa itse gore a na tota re batla go etsa eng. Re bua ka radical economic transformation, a re be re bua ka seo se re itseng gore re tla se etsa. E ka ba ka economic control, e ka ba ka taba tsa lefatshe, e ka ba ka ntho e nngwe le nngwe. We must be able to pinpoint precisely what we want to do, go reduce and structure and craft an economy that will be greatly representative as we address the structural problems of excessive concentration and monopoly control as it was envisaged at Morogoro, because we took some of these decisions long ago, and therefore we now need to speed up the process of implementing them. We must use the concept of broad-based economic development. We must use the issue of state preferential procurement, the Black Industrialist Program, and many other initiatives to actively deconcentrate the commanding heights of our economy, to ensure greater domestic investment, and above all, to create work and to promote and create entrepreneurs in our country. We must, yes, go to the rural areas. We must go and empower our people in the rural areas. The government must support economic activity in the rural areas. The government must support economic activity in the townships. We must not only be supporting economic activity in the big cities. We must go down to the townships, to our rural areas, and support our people so that they can also become economically active. And the geography of our country still bears the deep scars of apartheid. It's still, the spatial development of our country is still reminiscent of what our country was put through. We must also begin to transform the spatial development of our country. Lerona, in our townships, even in the rural areas, re batla go bona di skyscrapers, re batla go bona di buildings tse tona, re batla go bona di tsela tse ntle. The ANC government must lead in that process. We must massify our infrastructure development program. And as Comrade Gugile Mkwinti always says, we must make sure that South Africa becomes a building site. All over in the rural areas, in the townships, we must truly transform our country. And yes, we do have the capabilities to do so. And we also do have a number of skills that are going to do precisely that. One dimension, comrades, is that of the land question. The land question, particularly with regard to its role in the rural areas, particularly when it comes to agriculture. If we are to learn anything from some other countries, then we should know that land reform needs to achieve an effective balance between food security and the imperative of social justice. If we are to learn anything from our own land reform and land distribution programs, then it is that formal ownership of land is not the only answer that we should be looking out for. We should also be looking out for how we empower those who are going to work the land to make sure that they are well positioned. Land reform without adequate numbers of extension officers, without suitable irrigation, fencing, and other relevant infrastructure, and without assistance in terms of inputs and marketing, is liable to end in disappointment. So as we do our land reform, we must also assist our communities who are working the land, yes, with irrigation. Irrigation must not only be a matter that is only reserved to the established white farmers. We want to see black farmers also having irrigation so that they can grow food. That is radical economic transformation. If we can do that, and if we can get young people to be spread throughout our rural areas in agriculture as extension officers, like what a country like Ethiopia did they trained 60,000 young people and spread them into the rural areas. And today, their agriculture contributes more than 40% to their GDP. Today, our agriculture does not contribute that much, but we can make sure that as we do our land reform, we can also massify the efforts that we are embarking on. We can get our young people to go and assist our farmers in the rural areas, and we can make sure that we develop our rural areas, because that is where our people live, and that is what we should care for. We need to recognize, therefore, that when it comes to the land question, radical economic transformation for inclusive growth is very much also an urban issue. The spatial features of the way the apartheid rulers reconfigured our country is something that we need to pay attention to, and that is also important. So, comrades, the radical economic transformation thrust that we are looking at is the type that in the end must be of great benefit to all the people in our country. As we move on to our policy conference, I invite you to sharpen your own minds, to sharpen your own thoughts, so that when you get to the conference, you are able to give full definition to what this radical economic transformation is all about. At the root of the poverty and inequality and unemployment of today is the systematic denial of decent education to our people, the skilling of our people. Now, what we are calling for here is that there needs to be massification of skills acquisition. We must not fall short of giving our young people skills so that we develop their skills base so that they can contribute to the economy of our country. It is essential to economic transformation that the transformation we're looking at must be sustainable, it must be truly radical, but it must also be widespread. We will not realize the objectives of our national democratic revolution unless we pay attention to this present moment of the state of our movement and the quality of our leadership. As we have done before, in the 1930s and in the late 60s, for example, we need to vigorously pursue a program of renewal and revitalization. And I'm saying this because we're going now facing our December conference, which will be preceded by the policy conference. Let us go to that conference armed with one mind that we are going to reunite the ANC, revitalize it, and rebuild it. The life of Moses Kotane reveals, comrades, that true leadership is about affection, it's about concern, it's also about respect for the masses. It is also about making our organizations truly responsive to the needs of our people. Even as we look at these important things, like changing the economy of our country so that the economy must work for our people, the real base that we need to strengthen is our organization. And this is a matter that we should not take lightly. We need, as the ANC, as the SACP, as COSATU and as SANCO, to also demonstrate, comrades, our care and our affection and respect for women and girls in our country and in our society. We need, particularly in the light of what we have gone through, we now know that Moses Kotane was a caring leader. He was a leader who was concerned about what was happening in society. We now know that that is the type of person that he was. and we need to emulate him. Now, we also know that in the past few weeks, we've had a number of women in our country being raped and being killed, and some of them being brutally killed, like Karabo Mukwege, who was killed senselessly and brutally killed. Now, if we are to become leaders of society, this is precisely the type of campaign that the African National Congress and Alliance as a whole must take up. We are the ones who must lead society and say no to the killing of our women, no to the rape of our girls, and no to everything bad that is happening in our ranks. This is the campaign. Comrades, we are leaders of society. We are the ones who must be in the forefront of making sure that we raise the level of consciousness amongst men. We raise the level of consciousness amongst men that rape will never be accepted in South Africa, that murder will never be accepted in South Africa, the killing of women and the abuse of women, that we will not accept it. We are the ones who must lead that campaign. We must lead it. We must lead this campaign through our branches. And comrades, if we take up this campaign, it will also help to revitalize our branches. It will also help to renew our branches. It will give our branches focus. It will give our branches meaning. And it will stop us from focusing on things that are not beneficial to society. What we should be doing as the African National Congress is to do what Moses Kotane was saying when he went to the Eastern Cape. And he said, we need to be amongst the people. We need to be addressing the issues that concern our people. Right now, the issue of rape concerns our people. The issues of the murder of women concerns our people. Some time ago, we launched a campaign on HIV/AIDS. And I say this because as the Deputy President, I'm the chairperson of SANAC. We launched a massive campaign. And it was a campaign in which many of our structures were involved. And we were able to succeed to bring the incidence of HIV incidents down. And similarly, this is a campaign that we must lead. We must embark on this campaign. There are many men in our country who are out there whose level of consciousness on these types of issues are low. We need to go and engage them. We need to go and engage them, and as men, we should be saying, not in my name. You are not going to do this in my name, and we want to stop you from doing what you are doing to the mothers and the daughters of our country. That is what we should be doing. So my desire as Deputy President of the ANC is that let us breathe life into our branches. Let us go back to our branches. Even if we just take up this campaign, comrades, even if we just take up this campaign and run with this campaign and reach out to every man in our society, it will be a campaign that is worthwhile. That is something practical that we can do. And I can bet you your last rand, this is the type of campaign that Moses Kotane would have gotten involved in. Let us go out and be like Moses Kotane. Like many of his comrades, Moses Kotane suffered terribly from the work that he did. He was banned, he was restricted, he was arrested, he was forced into exile, and he was separated from his family and friends, and he never departed from the path he had chosen. Today, let us all imagine ourselves as Moses Kotane and ask ourselves, what would Moses Kotane have done at this point in time? when women and girls are being raped and killed, Moses Kotane would have raised his hand. What would Moses Kotane have done if he saw his organization sliding down? He would have raised his hand. He would have raised his voice. Moses Kotane never sought any reward. He never sought any sympathy, for he saw the hardships he experienced as nothing compared to the daily suffering of the masses of our people. But by Yesu, our people are suffering out there. Moses Kotane took up the struggle to fight against the suffering of our people. In everything that we do, improving the lives of our people must be the one thing that is uppermost in our minds. As a generation that has inherited the revolutionary legacy of Moses Kotane, we must remain true to our mission, our principles, and our people. Presidenti wa rona o tlhagang ko Botswana o ile wa BNF o ile a re, integrity is what matters. We must be people of integrity, but we must also be people of great care, caring for our people. Let us be inspired by Moses Kotane's example to return to our best traditions of discipline, service, and unity. That is what Moses lived for. This is what Moses lived all his life for. It was a life of care, it was a life of concern, and it was a life of respect to all the people in our country. We too can go and lead that type of life. Today, as we do this Moses Kotane lecture, I would say, let us honor Moses Kotane and live up to the great ideals that Moses Kotane lived up for. Really Moses Kotane going to the ANC policy conference, going to make great inputs on what our movement should be focusing on and where our movement should be going. Really Moses Kotane going to the national conference, going to elect a leadership that will take this country forward, not backwards, that will take this country forward, not sideways, that will take this country forward, not into the ground. That is the type of Moses Kotane we should be looking out for. So, in my head, as I go to the policy conference, in my head as I go to the national conference, ke tla ipona ke le Moses Kotane. Le ntšhebeng sentle, ke tla ba ke tsamaya go tshwana le Moses Kotane. Ke tla ba ke leka go bua go tshwana le Moses Kotane. Ke tla ba ke leka gore ke etse dintho tse Moses Kotane a ne a di etsa go e neela setšhabeng gore setšhaba sa rona se tswelele pele. Re wena ke a go invita ke re a re tsamaye mmogo re ye conferenceng tse kaofela re be bo Moses Kotane. Mandla! Viva ANC! Viva!
Viva the spirit of
Amen.